Jesus references the days of Lot when he speaks of the end times in Matthew 24 and Luke 17. And you're about to see why when we jump into Genesis 19. But beyond that, there are so many deeper connections and revelations in this chapter that I can't wait to show you. So let's jump into Genesis 19. This is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the previous chapter, Abraham prayed, interceded for Lot living in Sodom, prayed that God would spare him, and now we're about to see that unfold and how those prayers affected what happens. It says, the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth. Now, just to recall chapter 18, we have these men come to Abraham, three of them. One of them ends up being God. God's in the midst of them. We're told in chapter 18, verse 12, or verse 2, verse 16, and verse 22 that these are men. And in this chapter, in verse 10, we're going to see that these are men. And yet, we're told they're two angels. So at times, it seems to kind of go back and forth. And as we see the story open, one of the questions we have as we think about Abraham and what he's done with Lot and the king of Sodom is God gave Abraham victory over some enemy kings, and the king of Sodom and a few other kings benefited from that victory. Abraham kind of by rescuing Lot, he indirectly rescued, the king of Sodom and those who were with him. And so one of the questions we have is, what happened to the king of Sodom? After Abraham rescued him, where is he? Because now all we see is Lot sitting in the gate of Sodom. And either way, this idea notes that Lot has a kind of authority in the city or community. He's a kind of judge or some kind of leading figure in the community. And again, that's likely involving some kind of authority to make judgments on some level. And we're going to see the men of Sodom kind of reference this in a few verses. But Lot bows himself to the face, his face to the earth. And we've already seen the previous chapter opened the same way. Abraham sees the men approaching him. He recognizes whose presence he's in, and Abraham bows himself to the ground because he recognizes the majesty of the presence that he's in. And obviously, Lot realizes something unique about these two angels. So a question I have is, what did Lot know about them? What did he think about them? He recognizes something somewhat familiar. Verse 2, and he says, "My lords," so he recognizes authority, "please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." And they said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." They've been commissioned by God to go and evaluate the city and where it's at. And this is the exact same response that we saw Abraham have to the travelers coming towards him in chapter 18. So the last chapter, Abraham showed the same kind of hospitality. This right here is almost verbatim what is said about Abraham in the previous chapter. Abraham says, rest, eat, wash, then you can go on your way. And this is what Lot says to the angels. Eat, let me wash your feet, spend the night, then you can go on your way. Either way, we see Lot have the same kind of hospitality that Abraham, his uncle, demonstrated in the previous chapter. And so they go, "No, we have other plans," but he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. And this is a very specific detail about the kind of food Lot ends up offering to the two angels who are viewed or appearing as two men in the city. And usually, if you look at the Old Testament, unleavened bread is associated with sacrifices given to God, or associated with Passover, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So just be thinking about those correlations as Lot recognizes who's in his presence, and he bows himself to the face of the earth, and he offers unleavened bread specifically. And again, this is a very odd detail to focus on, but as you see the rest of the Old Testament, it might bring clarity to what's happening here. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." This is the same idea of Adam knew his wife. Note sexual intercourse. That's what's happening. That's what they want. So the question I have is, do they think that Lot is keeping these men to himself in order to do these things with them? because Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they've come under the shelter of my roof. In other words, he's showing that these 2 strangers are under his care and protection. Kind of like Rahab with the 2 spies. The 2 spies go into the promised land, spy it out. Rahab takes them under her roof, hides them. She cares for them and protects them so that there's no harm that comes upon them. And by bringing them under her roof, she indirectly ends up being saved. And what we're going to see is something very similar happening with Lot. He brings these 2 men, shows hospitality, cares for them, provides for them, feeds them, shows the hospitality, and then Lot ends up being saved from the judgment that's coming upon Sodom. I think there's correlation there. But either way, he offers the daughters. That gets weird, not going into that. They said, stand back. They said, this fellow came to sojourn. They recognize he's a stranger, and he's become the judge. And I think this might confirm that Lot was actually... he had a level of leadership in that city. He had some kind of authority, if not a judge, right? They're at least saying that this stranger has risen to power and climbed the ranks and has apparently turned on the people as if to be better than them. Either way, what you're about to see happen is they say, we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against Lot, drew near to break down the door, but the men reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And this is what God did for Noah in the ark, to seal the fate of those on the outside. This is what happens with the Israelites at the Passover, right? Their houses are sealed shut, marked by the blood of the Lamb on their doors, which was the means of God's protection. And the same thing happens here with Lot. It seems to note a kind of sealing their fate of the wicked men of the city. They have decided to remain in whatever kind of wickedness and sin that they're being punished for, and that by the door shutting, it might be an image of their fate being sealed because they're outside of the home of Lot, which functions for now as a kind of safe space until he's called to go outside of the city, which is the real safe space designated by God. And either way, we've seen this image before with Noah and the ark. We've seen this image before, or we will at the Exodus and over, Rahab's house. So the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? The angels, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city, bring them out of the place. What I didn't read was that they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance. So they shut the door, strike them with blindness. And I have a question. Why did the angel strike them with blindness in this situation? Of all the ways they could have stopped them from breaking down the door and coming in or showing a kind of judgment against them, why blindness? And weirdly enough, we see Paul do a similar thing to a rebellious man in Acts who is opposing the gospel and keeping someone from believing. And then we see Elisha, the prophet, blind the armies outside of a city that he's in. The armies of Syria are coming to look for him and kill him in 2 Kings. And then blindness comes upon them, and he leads them to the king of Israel. And then verse 12, the angels say, if there's anyone here you want to save, bring them out. Right? So this is what Jesus tells the people of Israel in Matthew 24. Because Jesus will make the correlation, hey, the end of days I'm talking about, the day of the Son of Man, the day I'm referring to is going to be like the days of Lot. He makes that explicit connection. And when Jesus warns the Israelites in Matthew 24, what they see in the future day that he's referring to, they see the impending doom coming upon Jerusalem. They see the Roman armies descending upon the city. And Jesus is telling them ahead of time in Matthew 24, flee the city when you see what's happening. Flee the city when you see the signs that I'm giving you. Take my word, obey, and leave. And going out of the city was obedience to avoid destruction. And in the same way, Lot is faced with this option. Will you obey the instruction and leave to avoid the destruction coming? And the idea of going out in obedience is also what the prophets told the people of Jerusalem when Babylon, the armies are coming in to destroy the city as judgment against them. And then Hebrews speaks of us going out of the city to go be with Jesus who is cast out of the city, right? Which is the idea of us not siding with the wicked generation that rejected Jesus, but siding with Jesus and his kingdom. And in that sense, we're taking were fleeing for refuge in the heavenly city of Jerusalem that will really stand the test of time. And they say, we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. And this is the proclamation that God brought through Jonah to Nineveh, right? But Nineveh repented, unlike the people of Sodom here who persist in rebellion and wickedness and rejection of God's opportunity or offering. And so God warns the righteous of what is coming, likely because of Abraham's prayer in the previous chapter for Lot. This intercessory prayer on the part of Abraham that spares Lot, or is a part of the way God saves Lot, that's an image of Jesus, who is our high priest, who not only warns us of the judgment that's coming and to get right with God and to receive salvation that he offers, but he also mediates between us and God, this new covenant, so that we can be saved from the coming wrath. So we see this intercessory heart of Jesus being the ultimate high priest, somewhat displayed in Abraham and his prayer being a part of the way God saves Lot. And then there's an outcry against the people that they're referring to. It has become great. This is what God says about Babylon, or Babel, the Tower of Babel, in a few chapters earlier, that the people, they become essentially really smart and great, and nothing they do can be stopped. This temple and city, it's got the attention of God, and he comes down to deal with it. And either way, the way Lot is referred to is he's distinguished from the wicked people of Sodom. He's not among them. He's not counted as one of them. He lives there, but he's not one of them. He's one of God's people in the midst of them. You know, Peter will later, in hindsight, look back and say that righteous man's conscience was tormented, living among the wicked all the days that he did. And he says, we're about to destroy this place, and the outcry against its people has become great. And so this is why I think Lot is distinct from the people who are about to experience judgment. He's about to be saved. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place. The Lord is about to destroy the city. In other words, I think this also might be an allusion to Matthew 24 as well. Jesus talks about in those days, like Noah and like Lot, everyone will be marrying and eating and drinking. In other words, these guys were expecting life to continue on normally. We're waiting to get married to the daughters of Lot. And Lot comes, finds his sons-in-law, and goes, get out of this place. The Lord, which by the way, how would they know who he's talking about? The Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law just to be jesting. So I guess, does this mean that Lot left his house to go and find them in their houses? Is this why the angels blinded the men so that Lot could safely navigate the city to find anyone whom he wanted to spare? Because this does seem to be happening in the middle of the night, just like the Passover, just like the Exodus. And so Lot is clearly concerned for others who are of the city, just as Abraham was concerned. They're told to get out of the place, just like Noah and the flood. God calls him out. Lot is offering that same invitation, right, to his sons-in-law who don't really think he's serious. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, so that's why it's the middle of the night, and now daylight's dawning, saying, take your wife, take your 2 daughters who are here, so that you are not swept away in the punishment of this city. But he lingered. So the men seized him, right? They take hold of Lot and his wife and 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful. In other words, the Lord not waiting for Lot to get his act together, but answering Abraham's prayer, he pulls Lot out and brings him outside of the city. This is God rescuing those whom Abraham interceded for, the righteous, right? The angels are on a rescue mission. God's bringing justice and judgment, but also rescue to those who are righteous. And in this case, they're brought out of the city, which is a good thing. Which in Genesis 3, we have this image of Adam and Eve, they sin and they're cast out of the garden, and that's exile due to sin. And I think the idea of being outside of a city that is experiencing judgment, right, versus being cast out of the presence of God, both of these images will be used to communicate these spiritual truths of the gospel later on in the New Testament. And as they brought them out, one said, escape for your life. I thought they already are saved. So he says, escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said, we'll get to that in a minute, but God just brought them out. Lot still has to escape to save his own life. To look back or stop anywhere in the valley is essentially to go back to what is about to be destroyed by fire. And also, they say to Lot, escape to the hills. Why are the hills the destination or a safe place? This also brings us back to in the law of God, he talks about the cities of refuge for those who commit unintentional manslaughter. I think there's something to meditate on that as well. And Lot said, no, my lords, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you've shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. We see Abraham asking God in the last chapter to find favor in his sight. God, let me find favor in your sight. And God, looking with favor upon people so far, is showing them kindness like he's done over and over repeatedly. And a question I have is, why does Lot think the destruction and disaster that's coming on Sodom would somehow reach Lot in the hills? Why would it go there? How would it go there after the angels just told him escape to the hills? Right? Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, which is why I said meditate on the cities of refuge that God appoints for the unintentional manslaughter in Israel. And he says, it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved? What is interesting is that there's a safe city outside of this wicked city, and Lot is allowed to flee there. Again, the cities of refuge for those who kill someone unintentionally. But why does it matter that it is a little one? Why does it matter that it is a little city? Twice it's repeated. Why is that significant in Lot's reasoning? Why might that, why is that used by Lot to not bribe, but get the angels to let him go there? Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and I have some free gifts for you on our website at abovereproachministry.com. Maybe you want to learn how to study the Bible. We have free Bible classes just for you. Are you maybe a newer believer? Go ahead and check out our Christianity 101 Foundations course. Maybe you hate videos. Well, we have a podcast, so you can listen to all of our messages on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Maybe you want to join or start a discussion group. Check out our map of all the current armed discussion groups all around the world. And do you maybe live near Greenville, South Carolina? If you do, you should check out our church on Friday nights. Visit movementchurchsc.com for more information. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can snag a copy of my book, Fruitful, or head over to the donate page and donate through debit or credit card, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or even mail a check to P.O. Box 509, Inman, South Carolina. And if you want to make a ministry connection, feel free to reach out to me on our website. All right, I know that was a lot, but I'm done. So let's get back to the video. He said to him, it's been they so far, they said to him, but now it's he. Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. I will not overthrow that city because Lot is going there. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar, which was a footnote meaning little. A few things to think about. Were they planning on overthrowing this city too before Lot requested that it would be preserved from destruction? Because right now we see Lot playing the role Abraham did in the last chapter. Abraham mediates, intercedes for Lot and the righteous in the city, but now Lot is mediating or interceding for an entire city and requesting its preservation. And God just didn't spare Sodom for Lot's sake, right? Because he didn't find 10 righteous people like Abraham asked. And yet Lot is going to intercede via prayer and communication, request that, hey, that whole city, would you preserve it because I'm going there? And they do. Righteous Lot, which is what Peter refers to him as, righteous Lot is the reason God graciously decided to preserve Zoar. Zoar will later be a landmark and reference point later on in the scriptures. And one of the main scriptures to note is in Isaiah 15, verse 5. It speaks of Zoar as being a place where fugitives are fleeing to, just like Lot here. And so there's a contrast between two cities happening. If you noticed it, if you didn't, now you see it. There's one city that comes under God's judgment. There's another one that God spares from wrath, and it functions as a place of refuge for others because of this righteous man that's going there and interceded for it or asked God to spare it. Jesus will later in the New Testament condemn several cities to judgment in his day because of their unbelief. And then he'll compare those cities to the ancient cities of the past that would have been preserved if they saw Jesus' signs. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar, right? So obviously all of these events are transpiring over the course of like the middle of the night, and now it's, daybreak, and now the sun is on the earth, or has risen, what do you call that, sunrise, and the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. It's interesting that this is the language used to refer to the fire that comes down as judgment. It's exactly the language of the flood story. And we're supposed to, I think, see this as a smaller flood story of judgment, and this time with fire instead of water, and this time localized, and depending on how you understand the flood story, instead of all the life on the land, right? So he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground. This is very interesting. What grew on the ground. But either way, God overthrowing those cities right here that I'm highlighting in green, it notes a kind of rebellion on the part of those who are being overthrown. Like they're committing, treason. And this is a theme throughout the Bible. Those who come against God directly, they're overthrown. They're cast down. And either way, we'll get to the New Testament eventually. But what grew on the ground is what's in focus for some reason. Why mention that in passing? Why does the narrative single out the agriculture? Wouldn't that be assumed? Like, I don't need you to tell me and everything that grew with the people. Obviously, that's decimated too. So why make a passing statement to clarify things that grow on the ground are also destroyed? And I think likely because in Genesis 13, verse 10, right, when Abraham goes, hey, Lot, choose whatever region you see that looks good. Lot sees the land of Sodom. And it says it was like the garden of God. It appeared so abundant with life, and it was flourishing, and it was, well maintained and full of food. And now it's become the opposite. It used to be compared to the garden of God, and now it's the opposite. And Lot's wife behind him looked back. She became a pillar of salt. Might be what Jesus references when he says, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back isn't fit for the kingdom. But Lot's wife clearly was attached to Sodom still. She was pulled out, seemingly against her will. Whether she literally turned to go back there or not, it seems as though she's caught up in the destruction that came on the city, and the fire consumed her. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Now the camera pans to Abraham. We've seen Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and Zoar, and now back to Abraham, who interceded in the previous chapter. And he comes, he's looking down, and the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. I think we're supposed to view, based on how the story has unfolded so far, we're supposed to view God's chosen partner, Abraham, as being safe from the destruction on a high place. That's kind of like the Garden of Eden, or kind of like the safe space of, Jerusalem, the city of God. Either way, he's under the tree where God met him in the previous chapter, right? This seems to note Abraham is in a kind of Eden, looking down upon the destruction coming, that has come on Sodom and Gomorrah, while he's, kind of tucked away in this neat little place God has visited and passed by. And so it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham. Right here, God remembered Abraham. That's why he sent Lot out. So the narrative is making an explicit connection between Abraham's prayer and Lot being saved in the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. And that's what's said of Noah in Genesis 8. It says God remembered Noah and made a wind blow to bring about the new world for Noah and his family to live in with the animals. And this is exactly why God spared Lot and brought him out for Abraham's sake. In other words, in the flood story, it's about being attached to Noah and being saved with him. Now, it's about being attached to Abraham and being blessed by proximity to him. In this case, Lot, by blood, is related to Abraham and benefits from that. And one of the benefits that kind of falls onto Lot is that he's saved for Abraham's sake. And this just becomes an image of being connected to Jesus, grafted in Jesus, saved because of Jesus and the covenant that God has established with his Son on our behalf. And this is the very first time we see God spare others because he regards or remembers his covenant with Abraham. This is the very first time we see that explicitly stated. And this will be repeated over and over as a theme throughout the rest of the Old Testament, the rest of the Bible, when God spares Israel time and time again and works with them continually because he remembers his covenant with Abraham. And again, this just is an image of Jesus and the new covenant we have with God in Christ. God remembers his Son's work, regards us for the rest of eternity through the work of his Son, and we are safe and secure in Jesus, the way that Noah's tucked in the boat, the way that Lot is taken out of the city. We're tucked in Jesus. Now, Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters. We're back to Lot, right? For he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he's just on the outskirts, it seems like. He lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. What a life. And the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old." So because of that, there's not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine. We'll lie with him so that we may preserve offspring from our father. So the idea of the firstborn saying to the younger just brings us back to Genesis 16, when the story opens with Sarah saying to Abraham, "Hey, God has withheld offspring from us, so we should use Hagar to produce an offspring. Maybe that's how we'll do it." But this time, it's Lot and his daughters, or rather, it's Lot and his daughters are trying to acquire descendants to secure Lot's name and their future through Lot. In other words, they're convinced no one would take them, and so Lot's, our dad, is our only option to secure a future for ourselves and a name and descendants. But my question is, why have they concluded that there's not a man on earth to come into us? Like, what leads them to that? Why would no one marry them? And then the whole "come, let us make," that statement right there just brings us back to Nimrod and the people of Babel a few chapters ago, saying, "Come, let us make bricks. Let us make a tower and a city. Let's make our name ascend to heaven." It notes, when this is in the mouths of humans, scheming and figuring things out and trying to be self-preserving, it notes self-preserving human ambition. But also it's forward-looking to Israel, saying, at the base of Mount Sinai, they'll say, "Hey, Moses is taking a while. Come, let us make a golden calf." It's always human ambition that is in opposition to the will of God. And their plan, her plan, the firstborn, is to make their father drunk so they can sleep with him. I know, weird, but we see something very similar with Noah. In Genesis 9, Noah becomes intoxicated from too much wine in Genesis 9, and his youngest son decides to take advantage of that, and he's naked, and he does something to his father, uncovers his nakedness. Now, here, it's 2 daughters, the oldest and the youngest, purposely getting their father drunk to sleep with him to produce their own offspring. Noah's oldest son and middle son in Genesis 9 find their father naked and they cover him, right, when the youngest son violated him. But here, Lot's oldest and second born uncover Lot's nakedness. So we see this inverted image. Instead of covering, it's uncovering, and playing the role of the younger son, Ham, in Genesis 9. So they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. And again, right here, it's "let us preserve offspring from our father," which means it isn't directly for his sake and his good, but from him, which makes him a tool to acquire what they desire. And what's interesting is he didn't know what happened to him. He didn't know what happened. The next day, the firstborn said to the younger, "Hey, I did it. I lay with my father last night. Let us," again, "make him drink wine tonight too. Then you go in, you lie with him, and then we can preserve offspring from our father." And what we see here is our two daughters, trying to secure their own future by scheming to use their father, just as Sarah tries to do with Hagar and Abraham, just as Eve tries to do with the fruit to secure her own kind of godhood and knowledge of good and evil. And I don't need God, I'll become. It's that same kind of reaching for what is forbidden and what is really, not the will of God. And so they made their father drink. The younger rose, lay with him. Again, he didn't know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. Right? This is so weird. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab, or Moab in Hebrew. He's the father of the Moabites to this day. So Moab is the firstborn's son, and the younger, her son, firstborn, is Ben-Ami. He's the father of the Ammonites. Interestingly enough, Moab, later on, will use sexual enticement and trickery to scheme against Israel to lead them into idolatry. And so the origin of Moab, how he was conceived, is very similar to what his descendants will do with Israel. It's this scheming and producing and involving, sexual relations. And then the Ammonites. Here we have the origin story of two of Israel's biggest enemies later on in the story. The Ammonites and Moab will be two big problems, two big thorns in Israel's side. But, interestingly enough, God will raise up a woman, a Moabite, named Ruth, who comes from Moab later on. And we see Ruth kind of redeems the origin story of her people and her ancestors. And she ends up being an admirable, God-fearing woman that trusts God. And she trusts God to secure a future for her and her mother-in-law, Naomi. And Ruth will be in the genealogy of Jesus. And I think she's the great, technically Naomi, but she's in the lineage of David, who ends up being the great-great-grandson, I forget. But either way, this Ruth will come from Moab, and she's one of the non-Jews in the lineage of Jesus. And so when speaking about the end times, Jesus says in Luke 17:32, he says, remember Lot's wife, who we know looked back, became a pillar of salt, consumed, and then he proceeds to use her as an example of what it will be like during the end times. And so Jesus wants this story to be on the mind of his audience as he's explaining what they should be looking for, what signs will come, what they should expect. It's like the days of Noah and like the days of Lot when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And all these different things we've kind of unpacked should help bring clarity to what Jesus really means when he speaks about this in Luke 17. So that is our study on Genesis 19. In the next video, we will continue in Genesis chapter 20. And if you'd like to see my End Times series, where I dive deep into Luke 17 and Matthew 24, and who's taken and who's left, and the days of Noah, if you'd like that series or those videos, you can find those right here. Hopefully this Bible study was a blessing. I'll see you later. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.